They kept using my fence like it was theirs. And for a while, I let it happen because it felt too small to fight over. Until one morning, I walked outside with my coffee, and there was a stranger's bedsheet stretched across my backyard like it owned the place. And something about that moment just sat wrong in my chest in a way I couldn't shake. I live in a quiet stretch of town just outside Columbus, Ohio, the kind of neighborhood where the houses are packed, close enough that you can hear someone sneeze if their windows are open, where fences don't really separate lives so much as they outline them. You know what I mean? They're more suggestion than boundary. My place backs up against another yard, and our fences meet right down the middle, wood against wood, like two people leaning back to back who don't really know each other, but have no choice but to coexist. Now, I'm not a difficult neighbor. I keep to myself. I mow my lawn on Saturdays. I wave if I see you. And that's about the extent of it. I like things simple, predictable. So the first time it happened, it didn't even register as a problem. There was a t-shirt, just a damp gray t-shirt, hanging over the top of my fence, the sleeve kind of drooping down into my yard like it was tired. I remember standing there looking at it, taking a sip of coffee, thinking, must have blown over. Because that's what happens, right? Wind picks things up, carries them a little too far, drops them where they don't belong. No big deal. So I grabbed it, tossed it back over the fence, didn't even think twice. 2 days later, it was a towel. But this time, it wasn't just hanging there randomly. It was laid flat, spread out, balanced, and I remember pausing, like really pausing, staring at it longer than I should have because something didn't line up. Wind doesn't place things neatly. Wind doesn't smooth out wrinkles. Wind doesn't care about symmetry. Still, I let it go. I told myself I was overthinking it, that maybe it just landed that way by chance. And honestly, I didn't want to be the guy who turns a towel into a neighborhood issue. But then it kept happening. First socks, then a pair of jeans, then another shirt, different color, different fabric, same exact spot. And suddenly, it wasn't occasional anymore. It was a pattern. Now the people who lived behind me, I didn't know them well, but I knew enough. Big family, kids running around, laundry constantly going. Their yard was smaller than mine. Their clothesline lines stretched tight from one end to the other, always full like they were trying to solve a problem with not enough space. And my fence, well, my fence sat just a little higher, caught more sun. And right around mid-afternoon, there was this steady breeze that rolled through like clockwork. Perfect drying conditions. I started noticing it more after that. The way things appeared in the same spot, not tossed, not tangled, but placed deliberate, like someone had looked at my fence and thought, yeah, this will do. And that's when it started to bother me. Not because of the laundry itself. I mean, it's just clothes, right? But because it changed how my space felt. It's hard to explain unless you've experienced it, but there's something subtle about seeing someone else's belongings in your yard that shifts the atmosphere. Like your space is no longer fully yours, like it's being borrowed without permission. I had a friend over one afternoon, Mark. He's the kind of guy who notices everything. And he pointed at a pair of socks hanging off my fence and goes, "You start a laundry business I don't know about." I laughed it off, but inside, yeah. It bothered me more than I let on because I didn't have an answer, and I didn't want to make it a thing. So I did what most people do. I ignored it for a while until one morning I stepped outside. Same routine. Coffee in hand. And there it was. A full bed sheet. Not draped, not hanging loosely, but stretched. Clipped across 2 panels of my fence like it had every right to be there, blocking part of my view, catching the sunlight like a sail. And I just stood there staring at it, feeling this slow shift from confusion to something sharper. Because that wasn't an accident. That took effort. That took intention. And for the first time, I felt it clearly. This wasn't about laundry anymore. It was about boundaries. That afternoon, I finally decided to say something. I caught my neighbor, his name was Daniel, out in his yard while he was messing with a plastic laundry basket. Kids running around him like he was the center of some kind of orbit. I kept it light, casual, didn't want tension. "Hey," I said, leaning slightly over the fence. "I've been noticing some clothes ending up on my side. Just wanted to check in." He looked up, squinted a little like he was trying to decide how seriously to take me, then smiled. "Oh, yeah," he said, waving it off. "Sometimes things spill over when we're drying stuff." Spill over. I remember that phrase sticking with me because spilling over doesn't clip itself neatly across a fence. But I nodded, smiled back. "Yeah, makes sense," I said, even though it didn't. Because in that moment, I had a choice. Push it or keep the peace. And I chose peace, at least for then. But walking back into my house, I had this quiet thought in the back of my mind that wouldn't leave if I didn't draw the line. Where exactly was it going to be drawn for me? For a few days after that conversation with Daniel, things got quiet. Too quiet, actually. No socks, no shirts, no mystery towels showing up like uninvited guests. And for a second, I thought maybe that was it. Maybe all it took was a casual mention, a little awareness, and we were good. I remember standing in my backyard that weekend, trimming a few overgrown branches along the fence line, noticing how clean it looked again. Just wood, sunlight, and space. My space. And there was something weirdly satisfying about that, like things had clicked back into place. But peace like that, it didn't last because about a week later, it started again. Only this time, it wasn't subtle. It was almost confident. I walked out one morning and there were 3 items hanging across my fence. 2 t-shirts and a pair of kids' shorts clipped evenly, spaced out like someone had taken a step back to admire their work. And that's when I noticed it. Clothespins. Not just any clothespins, but bright blue ones clipped firmly onto the top edge of my fence, my side of the fence. I stepped closer, coffee still in hand, and just stared at them because that changed everything. Clothes accidentally blowing over. Fine. Stuff landing weird because of wind. Sure. But clothespins, those don't just appear. Someone had reached over. Someone had leaned across that boundary physically, intentionally, and used my fence like it was part of their setup. And I don't know how to explain it exactly. But that moment felt different, like a switch flipped somewhere in my chest. It stopped feeling like a misunderstanding and started feeling like an assumption, like my silence had been interpreted as permission. I pulled the clothes off, unclipped each pin slowly, set everything back over the fence. Not thrown, not aggressive, just returned. But inside, something was building. Because now it wasn't just happening, it was continuing. Despite the conversation, despite the awareness, and that changes how you see things. Over the next few days, it became almost routine. I'd walk outside, and there'd be something new. A towel one day, a pillowcase the next. Once even a tiny superhero shirt that looked like it belonged to one of Daniel's kids clipped right at eye level like it was part of my morning view. And every time I'd take it down, every time I'd pause a little longer, and every time I'd feel that quiet question growing louder in my head. Why am I the one adjusting? Why am I the one accommodating something I never agreed to? I mentioned it to my sister on the phone one night. She lives out in Denver, doesn't deal with this kind of tight living, and she laughed at first. "Just say something again," she said. "Be direct this time." But that's easy to say when you're not the one who has to live next door to the situation every day. Because here's the thing about neighbors. You don't just interact with them once. You see them again and again and again. Every wave, every nod, every small moment gets shaped by whatever tension you create. And I didn't want that. I didn't want awkward silence every time we both stepped outside. I didn't want passive-aggressive energy lingering in the air over something as small as laundry. But at the same time, it didn't feel small anymore. So instead of another conversation, I tried something softer, something neutral. I went to a hardware store down the road, one of those places that smells like wood and dust and old advice, and picked up a small outdoor sign. Nothing aggressive, nothing rude, just simple black letters on a white background. Please do not hang items on fence. That was it. Polite, clear, hard to misinterpret. I installed it on my side of the fence, right where most of the clothes had been showing up. Made sure it was visible, not hidden, not confrontational, just there. And for about a week, it worked completely. The fence stayed empty. No surprises, no socks greeting me in the morning, no fabric stretching across my view. And I remember thinking, okay, this is how you handle things like an adult. No conflict, no awkward conversations, just communication, simple, effective. Problem solved. Except it wasn't. Because one afternoon, I had just gotten back from work, still loosening my tie as I walked through the backyard. I looked up and there it was again. A bed sheet, different color this time, light blue, clipped, tight, spread across two panels like it had never left. And for a second, I actually just stood there and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it felt. The sign was right there, clear as day, and yet completely ignored. And that's when something shifted again. Because now it wasn't about misunderstanding. It wasn't about space. It wasn't even about convenience. It was about disregard, and that hits differently. I walked up to the fence, ran my fingers along the edge where the clothes pins were gripping, feeling the flat wood, the way it made it so easy, so convenient to use. And I realized something. I had been approaching this the wrong way. I kept trying to change behavior with words, with signals, with patience. But behavior doesn't always change because you ask it to. Sometimes it changes because the environment does. I stood there for a while thinking, really thinking not about what to say next, but about what made this possible in the first place. The fence, flat top, easy grip, perfect height. It wasn't just a boundary. It was functional, useful, inviting even. And as long as it stayed that way, this was going to keep happening. Not because Daniel was trying to be disrespectful, at least not entirely, but because from his perspective, it worked. It solved his problem. And my discomfort, well, that was invisible on his side of the fence. So I stopped thinking about how to talk to him and started thinking about how to make my fence unusable. Not damaged, not hostile, just no longer helpful. Something that didn't invite the behavior in the first place. And once that idea settled in, everything became clearer. I didn't need another conversation. I didn't need another sign. I needed a solution that didn't rely on him changing. Just one small adjustment that would change the outcome every single time. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't about winning. It was about reclaiming something quietly without turning it into a fight. Once that idea clicked, I couldn't unsee it. It wasn't about Daniel anymore. It wasn't about whether he respected me or understood boundaries or even cared, because honestly, I had gone in circles trying to figure that out, and it never got me anywhere. This was simpler. If the fence stopped working for him, he'd stop using it. No confrontation, no tension, no drawn-out back and forth where nobody really wins. Just physics. So that weekend, I went back to the hardware store. Same place, same smell of sawdust and old wood. Same guy behind the counter who looked like he'd been giving practical advice longer than I'd been alive. I told him I was looking for something to protect the top of a wooden fence. From rain, from wear. Just general maintenance, which wasn't a lie. He nodded, walked me down one of those narrow aisles, and showed me a vinyl fence topper, smooth, rounded, designed to sit right along the top edge like a cap. Helps water run off, he said, tapping it lightly. Keeps the wood from rotting. I ran my hand across it. Slick, curved, no flat surface, no grip. And right there, I knew. Yeah, I said almost to myself. That'll do. Installing it took a couple of hours. Nothing complicated. Just lining it up, securing it along the shared stretch of fence, making sure it looked clean, intentional, like it belonged there. And when I stepped back to look at it, it actually improved the way the fence looked. More finished, more solid. But the real difference, you couldn't see it unless you knew what to look for. That flat edge was gone, replaced with a gentle curve that didn't hold anything, didn't support anything, didn't invite anything. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to control again. Not over him, not over the situation, just over my own space. The next morning, I walked outside with my coffee, same routine, same quiet air. And for a second, nothing had changed. No clothes, no surprises, just the fence catching the early light. And I remember thinking, maybe that's it. Maybe it's over. But habits don't disappear overnight. Later that afternoon, I heard voices from the other side. Kids laughing, Daniel talking, the usual background noise. And then a few minutes later, I saw it. A shirt, light-colored, lifted up over the fence and then clipped. Or at least in music attempt. Because the second the clothespin tried to grab onto that rounded edge, it slipped. The fabric music sagged for a second, then slowly, almost gracefully, slid right back down onto their side. I didn't say anything. I just watched. Music. A few seconds later, I saw the same hand reach up again. Try a different angle. Press a little music harder. Same result. Slip, fall, gone. And I'm not going to lie, there was something, music, deeply satisfying about that moment. Not in a vindictive way, but in that quiet, internal kind of way where everything music just works exactly how you hoped it would. No argument, no raised voices, just gravity, music doing its job. Over the next few days, it happened a couple more times. Music, a towel once, a pair of jeans another time. Each attempt a little more hesitant than the last. Music, like someone testing a door that used to be opened and now wasn't. And every single time, same outcome. Slide, drop, done. Until eventually, it stopped completely. No more clothespins. No more fabric draped across my view. No more moments of stepping outside and wondering what I'd find waiting for me. Just my yard again. Clean, quiet mine. A few days later, I ran into Daniel out back. Nothing dramatic, just one of those casual overlaps where you both happen to be outside at the same time. He nodded toward the fence. "Hey," he said. "You do something to that thing? Our stuff keeps slipping off lately." And there it was, that moment, the one where I could have said everything I'd been holding back. Could have pointed out the sign, the conversations, the weeks of quiet frustration. Could have turned it into a lesson, but instead, I kept it simple. "Yeah," I said, glancing at the topper. "Just added a cap. Helps protect the wood from weather." Which was true, just not the whole truth. He nodded like that made sense. "Ah," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "Yeah, we'll probably need to put up another line or something." And that was it. No tension, no awkwardness, no confrontation, just a problem quietly resolving itself. After that, things changed. Not overnight, not in some big noticeable way, but gradually their side of the yard adapted. A second clothesline went up. I noticed it a week later, stretched tighter, a little higher, clearly meant to handle more. The kids still ran around. The laundry still got done. Life continued, just without crossing that line anymore. And on my side, everything felt normal again. Friends came over, and there were no more jokes about mystery socks. Mornings felt lighter, simpler, like something small but persistent had finally been set right. And the best part, no one had to lose. No one had to be the bad guy. It just worked. But here's the thing that stuck with me. Even after all of it was over, I never actually told them why. Not really. I never said, "Hey, this bothered me." I never pushed back directly in a way that made it clear where I stood. I just changed the conditions, and sometimes I wonder, was that the right move? Because yeah, it solved the problem cleanly, efficiently, no drama. But at the same time it left something unsaid, something unrest. Like we both walked away from that situation, understanding what changed but never actually acknowledging why. And I don't know, maybe that's fine. Maybe not every conflict needs to be spoken out loud. Maybe sometimes the smartest move isn't confrontation, it's design. Or maybe I just avoided a harder conversation, one that might have mattered more in the long run. So I'm curious what you think. If you were in that situation, would you have done the same thing? Quiet fix, no conflict, or would you have pushed it further, made the boundary clear, even if it got uncomfortable? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you've ever dealt with a neighbor situation that started small and turned into something bigger than it should have been, I'd love to hear that too. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next.